Welcome to the One Inside, an Internal Family Systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sallenberger. On today's podcast, I talk with Liz Phillips about all things couples therapy. Hey everyone, I am so excited about this conversation with Liz. Liz Phillips comes to couples therapy after 4 decades of observing and experiencing couple disconnection, and 1 decade training in couples work to ensure she could be of service. She completed her Level 1 in IFS and Level 2 in Intimacy from the Inside Out. That is the couples division of IFS. I don't know that anyone calls it that, but I thought it would be a good term for IFIO. She now runs IFIO-informed workshops to introduce the model to other couples therapists. And she tells you all about that in this episode. Liz sent me a book in the mail after we recorded this podcast. So she's my new best friend, and I feel so seen and so loved. We talk about so many things. I think this is a great episode, and you can tell that Liz is just a great teacher. I am really thankful that she's vulnerable and open. I think these podcasts are best when guests share like great educational information and then they also share personal, vulnerable from their hearts. And so that I think just kind of pulls you in. So I think that you will love Liz and this episode. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is, two of my friends, Naomi Rather and Deb Curtis, they actually have a podcast that is just like this one, which is devoted to all IFS. Their podcast is devoted to all emotionally focused therapy. So that one is called That Relationship Show. So I'll put the link to the show notes, but that's on all the podcasts. Wherever you can find your favorite podcast, that's where you could find That Relationship Show. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about EFT, Naomi and Deb did interview Sue Johnson. So if you're interested in hearing that or hearing any more information about EFT, or if you're listening to this and you know more about EFT than IFS, welcome. I'm glad you're here, and definitely check out my friend's show called That Relationship Show. Also, you can check out Liz Phillips. Her website is lizphillipstherapy.ca. She is in Canada, so that's why that website looks like that. You can also get on my email list. I'm going to be sending out a free meditation here coming soon, and you can do that at tammysallenberger.com. You can also connect with me at IFS Tammy on Instagram, Clubhouse, and Twitter, and on the One Inside Facebook page. I will see you there. Enjoy. So, Liz, tell everyone where you are in the world and what would you see if you looked out your nearest window?
So in the world, I am in Toronto in Canada, and I'm sitting in my kitchen, and I have a wonderful bench seat here where I love sitting because the window is right next to me. And I look out and I'm in a townhouse. So I actually just see the side of the house next door, probably about 15 feet away. And then I get to watch the kids next door, these two little 3-year-olds play outside. And we're quite a little community here in our townhouse complex. And my tomato plant's growing in my window, which I'm going to plant this weekend outside in some containers.
Nice, nice. I was at the grocery store today and there were these huge, like a blueberry bush, and there was a couple of fruit things. And I was like, could I do that? And I just got intimidated. But I was like, I could plant a blueberry bush. So you do tomato plants in containers outside in your townhouse?
I do. Well, ideally, that's what I do. But every time I've tried to do it, something has happened. And so it takes me away. So last year I had to give them away to someone else to take care of. So this year I'm determined it's going to happen and nothing will take me away from them.
I love it. You're like, I have set this intention to have amazing tomatoes.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. Do you grow anything else?
No, just the tomatoes, because I realized in the past I have grown things in my an ex-partner of mine. He and I grew a lot of vegetables together, and then I was allergic to the zucchini we grew. I couldn't eat the cucumber we grew. I loved the gardening part, but I was really struggling with eating my produce. And so tomatoes and lettuce, really, that's it. Yeah.
Do you have you have an allergy?
Well, I get really bad stomach aches from anything that's a nightshade.
Well, I was just gonna say nightshades, but are tomatoes nightshades or not?
So they actually are, and weirdly, I don't have a bad reaction to them. But you put a zucchini or an eggplant in my body, or a mushroom, which is not a nightshade, it's a fungus, but that also gives me terrible stomach problems.
Wow, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. That
yeah,
stinks.
yeah, it does. Because I love them, they just don't love me.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any issues with dairy and like that's a little more common these days, like dairy and gluten?
Yeah, so what I've noticed is the higher the fat content, the less problem I have because I might be lactose intolerant. So if it's a nice Saint-André high fat cheese, I'm there.
Yes.
But if it's low fat yogurt, I'm in pain.
Interesting.
Yeah, so high fat. Yeah, which is good because I like high fat food.
Yeah, I mean, low fat yogurt,
Yeah,
why
what
bother?
exactly? That's like decaffeinated coffee.
Now, I am a decaf drinker, which I know is crazy, but I have enough energy and I don't need any caffeine. And I actually have a really strong like reaction to caffeine. So
Yeah,
yeah,
some
but I like
people.
coffee. I like the ritual of it. I like sitting outside with your coffee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's the ritual. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to hear about your as pu- sometimes I think I'm funny. I'm like, I want to hear about your defection from EFT into IFIO because
Yeah.
you defected.
I did kind of defact actually. Um, yeah, first I just want to say they're very similar. They have one place where they really diverged that caused my defection. And so what happened was, I knew I wanted to be a couples therapist, and I did some training before I even went to formal therapy school because I was so excited, and I thought one day I'll get to apply this training, but I got to become a therapist first.
So you wanted to be a couples therapist before you even like became a therapist. You're like,
Yeah.
I want to work with couples.
Yeah.
Was there anything that was happening in your life that's what drew you to couples therapy?
So, watching my own parents fall apart and being put in the middle of that relationship, and they unfortunately were not so well educated on not putting me in the middle, and at the time I thought that was a wonderful position to be in, and I thought myself quite wise at age 13, and I thought I'll just solve this for them.
I think most 13-year-olds think they're quite wise.
Yeah, that's right. And I just thought
Mm.
I'll handle this, and of course I didn't, and I failed. And then watching my own relationships struggle, and my romantic ones, friendships were never a problem, but my romantic relationships would come to these screeching halts, and I was so invested in self-help books and learning new tools, and going to therapy, and they still, I would feel like I'd grown, and there was always something. And so I was really committed to learning, like, what is it that makes romantic relationships tough for me and tough for people around me?
Mm.
And there has to be something. And so while I was between therapy schools, because I did actually begin at a therapy school that didn't work out, it turned out it was kind of a cult.
Oh,
I hadn't done my research. And so,
that kind of sounds exciting. I mean,
well,
not for you at the
yeah.
time, but as a story, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, one day I'll write the story. And we were in Ontario, the province that Toronto is in, we were not yet regulated. The profession wasn't regulated. We were just about to get regulated. So this school got away with a lot of things. So I realized about halfway through, I don't want to be in this school, and I left. In the end, the school disappeared. And then the province regulated the profession, and then I got into a proper school. But there were 2 years in between leaving one and getting into the one that I got into. And I thought, I don't want to wait. So I went to this couples therapy training program in Florida, and it was amazing. And they introduced me to Sue Johnson, and EFT. They couldn't believe this Canadian woman had no clue who Sue Johnson was. And so as soon as I got into my training school, I also started to train in EFT because I'm also a late bloomer. I was in my late 40s when I started therapy school. So I just thought there's no time to waste. I'm going to do it all.
Yeah. What were you doing before that?
I was a communications writer for a very long time. I went to art school. I thought I would be an art teacher, professor for a while there. And then when I went back to therapy school, I worked for a social enterprise, helping them doing administrative work, helping them with their leasing, just to put me through school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you go to Florida and you learn about Sue Johnson and EFT, and are you like, this is my jam. This is what I've been wanting to learn, know, and do.
Yeah. I think I was shaking with excitement the whole time I was at that program in Florida. I was the only non-therapist in the room.
Wow.
And I came back and then I pursued EFT, and EFT was such a game changer for me too. It put into place everything I had felt from an attachment perspective in my life. It made sense of it. And so I didn't feel like there was something wrong with me. It was the first time I felt depathologized.
Mm,
And that is something EFT and IFIO, which is the IFS couples protocol, have in common. Is that depathologizing. It makes sense of protective behaviors. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So can you tell us about, for the listeners that are, know way more about IFS than EFT, can you tell us what that means? Like you're down there, you're learning EFT, and it made sense from an attachment standpoint. Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. So EFT, which stands for emotionally focused therapy, is attachment based and neuroscience based. So lots and lots of research. And so the understanding is, why we start to develop these protective behaviors, like, a part of you, they don't use this language, this is now IFS language, but they're kind of saying the same thing. Like, in a relationship, I might be someone who yells, and my partner might be someone who withdraws when I yell. And in the past, I might have felt like I'm yelling because I'm a bad person and I don't know how to handle myself. And what EFT helped me understand is yelling is code for please see me, please pay attention, I need you. And that's code for I need the attachment. Because EFT recognizes that humans are born to bond and we develop relationally. When your organs know what to do, your heart knows how to beat, your lungs know what to do, your liver knows what to do, but our brains actually need another brain in relationship to develop. We will become brain damaged without that other brain. So attachment is neurobiologically programmed into us. We do not develop well without it.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so the neuroscience actually just gives evidence to all the attachment theory that has been around since John Bowlby. And the recognition that we have to be in relationship to an other in order to meet all of our developmental milestones. And when there are ruptures or there's trauma, then we don't reach those developmental milestones, and
Yeah.
something goes wrong. And then we start to develop these maladaptive ways of getting our needs met. But we have those needs, they are hardwired, and we don't outgrow them. They're
Mm,
not just for children.
okay. Okay. Do you want to say more about that?
Well, I think, so for kids, it's literally a life and death situation if they're neglected, if they're emotionally abandoned, not just physically. So, John Bowlby and his, I never remember what the word is for people who study under him, like Mary Ainsworth and all of the people who took his theories and really started to study what was happening with kids. We're looking at orphanages, post-war in the 40s and 50s, where the kids physical needs were met. So they might be in a very hygienic orphanage where all their physical needs are taken care of. They're fed, they're changed, but they were not held and loved. And the mortality rates would be 70 to 80%. And in the less hygienic orphanages where these babies were picked up and held and responded to, so they were getting those attachment needs met, the mortality rates were way lower. And so I can't remember what your question was. Oh, about kids. Right. So the kids will literally die if they do not get their attachment needs met. So it's very important for their mental well-being and their physical well-being. They also won't do well physically if their emotional states are not attended to.
Mm,
As adults, however, Gabor Mate, who is a brilliant medical doctor, but also, in the therapy space, um, says that an adult will not die of abandonment. You won't literally die, but you might feel like you will. And so we
mm,
never really lose that need for an other.
mm,
That we are born to bond, and we do much better. We thrive in connection.
mm. And I'm guessing that is so like validating and normalizing for people that feel that way, that they're like a part of them is dying or will die, or they live in this death place because of isolation or toxic relationships or yes, yes.
That's exactly right. And even before I knew I was going to be a therapist, I read a book called A General Theory of Love, which is written by two neuroscientists and a psychotherapist. And they actually were the ones who said, and Sue Johnson confirms this. Sue Johnson is the EFT developer, that it is people aren't being dramatic when they say, I feel like I've lost a limb. They're not being dramatic, that is how it feels. And the neuroscientists say, because you actually have lost part of your brain. When you're in close proximity with someone, and they're finishing your sentences and they know how you feel and they're very attuned because they're close to you, when they go, those neural pathways that have co-developed are going to now have to remap. So it is like losing part of you.
Wow.
It's not just hyperbole.
Mm, mm.
So it does make you feel less pathologized.
Yeah, yeah. And would you be open to talk about your own experiences of how your brain tries to remap, even like behaviorally, like what that might look like? And you can even speak of personal examples or sort of what you've seen.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I think I've had many processes of having to do that because I've had many breakups. And the one that felt like the healthiest remapping was through an IFS process. So I think it happened naturally. I'm thinking about a breakup. Actually, this is a good example. And this ex-partner and I were very good friends. And so I think he'd be happy with me, using this example, because he and I went through EFT together. And then we broke up, and now we're both doing IFS, but separately. And now we're friends and we're talking in a whole new way.
Wow.
And so through EFT, after the breakup with him in that model, the remapping happened naturally just through time and through talking with friends and getting a lot of validation. And I still thought of, like, what would he think and what would he have said and how would he have supported me, but I could feel it physically in my body.
Mm,
And so it took time for my body to shift out of that. And that, I think of brain and body as one, because our brain is our body. But the breakup after EFT, when I started to go down my IFS path of healing, I actually could feel the shifts in my brain as I started to attend to my parts who were really hurt, and know that it tracked farther back than this relationship, but to what this relationship represented in my history and what it repeated from my history, what got
mm,
reinforced. And so the act of actually having that self to part connection with that very hurt little girl, I could feel, you practically feel the rewiring. And so then
mm,
I would only notice it when something would happen, and I would think, wait a minute, how come I'm not having a rage response or a meltdown response? This normally would have just sent me to the moon, and I'm not having that response. And it's because I would have unburdened that part of me.
mm.
And my ex-partner has reported similar experiences too. Like, how come I'm not having those same responses? And IFS was a game changer for him as well in that remapping process.
Amazing. So that brings us to IFS. So when did you went to Florida, fell in love with this model with EFT, and then came back to Canada, got into your program, and when did IFS come on board?
So first I did a proper training in EFT, and then
Which is pretty complex, I understand.
It's a really complex model in how they map it. It's actually not, it's not that different from IFIO, but the way they map it, I found very complicated. I think
Okay.
they're even recognizing it's a little complicated. It's got many steps and stages. So it didn't land with me logically. But there's another reason why I would get stuck in EFT as well. And and then well, actually, that I should talk about that because that's what led me to IFS. So I did EFT, and I also did training in sensory motor psychotherapy as a trauma protocol. I did both their levels, and both of them felt to me like they had these very complicated toolboxes,
Mm.
and they made a lot of sense logically. I loved them. They made sense of my internal systems, but when I was actually in front of a client, I was like a deer in the headlights. And so I won't talk about sensory motor because that was a different experience. But with EFT, what would happen is the hope in the model, as I understand it, is if I can help one of the partners really access their vulnerability, then the other partner is going to soften and they're going to say, oh, you're not some angry, terrifying person. Your anger is actually masking the vulnerability you feel, that you think I don't love you. Of course I love you. Now that I see that, I will now be present and tell you I love you. That is a lovely concept in theory, but in my experience, that's not what happened. I would get someone to be very vulnerable, thinking that was what I was supposed to do. And of course, the other person would say, yeah, sure, I see that here, but what about all the 50 million times that person has just been horrible to me and yelled at me, and their parts? We're
Mm.
still not trusting,
Mhm.
we're still reacting. And now this person who's vulnerable says, oh my God, here we go again. I'm not being seen. And they're now getting re traumatized.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sitting here like the worst therapist in the world going, I
Right.
have just created a reenactment of everything that they have been trying
Yeah.
to get away from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was on the verge of leaving therapy. I just thought,
Wow.
I
Okay.
don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard. I would leave. My shirts were soaked, sweating buckets, and then soaking in shame on top of it, calling my colleagues, just saying, I can't do this. You know, I don't know what I was thinking. And then a girlfriend of mine who lived right next door in my townhouse complex, who subsequently moved, had trained in IFS. And she said, Liz, just before you leave, I want you to take this course. It's just an introduction. You can test it out and see what you think. And this was the program with Derek Scott in Canada. And I thought, no harm, no foul. I'll just try it and see what happens. So I gave it a shot. It was set out in 4 weekend modules over the course of, I think, 4 or 5 months. Within the first day, within the first morning, I had my aha moment. And after the first weekend, I just thought, I think I can figure out how to apply this to couples work.
Wow.
And I did. And I had a complete turnaround with a couple.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I knew I wanted to figure out what the couples version of IFS was. And it took another year. So for a year, I had a real Frankenstein's monster Liz version going of a little EFT, a little IFS. I purchased Tony Herbine Blank's videos. I think I even asked to see an IFIO supervisor, Kathy Curtis, before I had done the training, because I so wanted to apply it. And I had to wait for the train because I had to do level 1 first before I could do level 2.
Yeah.
So, and then I did a weekend. So a colleague of mine, he and I both trained in EFT. So we both signed up to do Tony's intro, not knowing if we were going to get into level 2. And then after we got into her intro, we got into level 1 and level 2 in quick succession. And he said, should we not do the intro? And I said, no way, we're doing the intro. We're going. So we went to Denver and met Tony, and those 2 days were amazing. And then a year later, we did the IFIO, and then ever since then, yeah, I was a convert.
So what I guess I want to hear about the the aha moment.
The aha moment in
In
Derek's?
Derek's, yeah, yeah, that first morning where you're like, I'm ready to go sell beach umbrellas.
Yeah,
I'm done.
exactly. Yeah.
And you go and you sit with Derek, and I'm guessing this was in person at the time,
Yeah, it
right?
was
This
in
was
person.
so you sit with Derek, and there was this aha moment. Yeah.
So Derek set up this exercise. It was a role play. So he got people to he set up a scenario of what it would be like if you were invited to a party where you had to go in your beachwear, and then ask people how they all felt. And so, different people expressed how they felt, and they became sort of the managers, like the one who said, okay, I'm going to spend the next 6 months on a diet, or I'm going to say I'm really sick that week and I'm not going to go, or I'm going to say yes now, but no later, or all the managerial things you might do.
Yeah.
And then he set up people who, once they were there, and if they had body image issues, I think and then we had an exile, sorry, we had an exile in there who just felt like, this is my worst nightmare, I don't want to do this, but I have to. And so the exile was sort of put in the middle of the room, then there were managers set up, and then the firefighters who would come in when anything around body image got activated. And we felt it. And what we saw was the internal system of the managers and the firefighters getting engaged. And and the exile, I think maybe I played the exile. I realized no one's paying attention to me.
Wow.
So I never understood that before, as I watched these managers and these firefighters go at each other,
Yeah.
and realize I'm still here feeling unlovable, uncomfortable, all the stuff that I was having going on in my body. So that was one aha moment of really getting the system for the first time.
Mm.
And the other aha moment was the depathologizing. So I think my professors in my therapy school could have told me 1,000,000,000 times to be non-judgmental, and it did not stop my parts from being judgmental of myself and my clients.
Yeah.
But when I actually saw the system in action, I had so much compassion for firefighters for the first time, that instead of wanting them to go away, I saw their value. I'm very aligned with managers. I am like all manager and self-like parts for the most part. And like, 5% self, and the rest are my managers. So I
Yeah.
hated firefighters. My system doesn't like them. So was the first time that I thought, of course they're doing what they're doing.
Mm.
And that changed everything for how I felt towards my couples, because I was constantly trying to get people not to be angry, get them not to be passive aggressive. I was in there trying to run the show. I
Mm.
had lots of parts that were judging with no consciousness of it, because countertransference is not enough of a concept for me to know my parts.
Yeah, right. So as therapists, that's what I think sometimes we do is we jump like so I'm imagining this scenario with all these uh kind of like psychodrama with all the different people representing the different parts, and then us as therapists jumping in the system and trying to get the firefighters to stop doing what they're doing, the managers, and then we ignore the exile too, and we both are trying to get the managers and the firefighters to like stop, and we go into the person's system and try to do that.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And, even as you're talking, I'm thinking about, a cisgendered white lesbian couple who I was working with. And one of them had a firefighter who was just, furious all the time. And then the other one, of course, had a part that would constantly shut her down. And I was so aligned with the one who was being shut down. And the one with the firefighter, I couldn't hear her. And I kept sort of trying to hope merchant, but we were in EFT. We were in an EFT protocol. I kept trying to hope merchant around, I can help you get your needs met, but this is why your partner's shutting down. And basically I was blaming her.
Yeah.
And so, I cringe when I think about that couple, because rightfully so, they left.
Mm.
And now I wish I could call them back and say, I see your firefighter. I see your firefighter. She had every reason to be angry.
Mm. Mm. Yeah,
So, but lesson learned.
I love that. And I also love that you were like, I'm still determined to do this with couples. Like that you did your IFS training and then you're like, all right, I'm going to come up with my own sort of thing and integrate all these things that I've learned and I'm going to apply this to couples until the next thing comes up for me because you were so passionate about working with couples.
Yeah. I was really passionate about working with couples, and I had to wait for the IFIO training, and I knew that it was going to help me, but I just I had no choice around the waiting, and I think what keeps me passionate about couples is that maybe it's that longing I had with my parents. If only I find the right thing, I can translate them to each other. You know, and that wasn't my job with them, but that's what it feels like. It's, you know, couples are all coming in with, it really is about the dynamic that you, it doesn't matter what the topic is. You can hear underneath and see underneath, it's, am I lovable? Am I okay? You know, are you going to leave? Are you going to stay? It always boils down to some basic questions. Am I acceptable as I am? Is there something wrong with me? And it just gets projected onto all the issues.
Yeah. And so at the beginning of our chat, you said something about your 13-year-old who failed.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about that and how you feel differently about your 13-year-old who failed in fixing her parents' marriage.
Yeah. Well, my conversation with her is, that wasn't your job, sweetheart, and they should not have put you in that position, and you couldn't have. You didn't have the tools. But most important, it wasn't your job.
Yeah.
And in fact, you know, rightly, I'm thank you for bringing that up, because she didn't fail. You know, she was really put in an extreme role.
Yeah.
So, you know, it really fits that IFS model of, that was never her role. But she took that extreme role to all her relationships subsequently. And she worked really hard to make it work, but she just didn't know how.
Mm,
And, you know, she was running the show in a lot of my relationships. She was really trying so hard to be an adult.
mm,
And when I finally helped her go do something fun, like what she really wanted to do was read a book or go swimming or ride her bike, those were her activities, and I was able to step into the relationship, things went very differently.
yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, and that's what another thing that IFS is bringing to the table is what parts of us are actually around the table in this relationship.
That's right. Yeah. And so, you know, whereas, you know, my ex and I would have these conversations pre-IFS that were, you do this, you do this, I think this, I think, we're psychoanalyzing each other, we're telling each other. Now, how the conversations always go is, hey, I've got this story I'm telling myself right now. And I got, you know, this part that's telling the story, here's all the feelings that are going with that.
Mm,
Then, you know, he has an opportunity to say, you know, that sounds really painful, that story, and that's not at all what's going on over here. Or it actually kind of is, like, your part is hearing something, but it's not quite accurate. But here, because here's what's going on inside me. This is what I think is going on. And it, you know, we've done a lot of repair work in the last 6 months, and it's actually been heartbreaking, because I would say we would both say that 90% of our relationship was a parts war.
yeah.
And most of it was stories that were not true. And in fact, we were on the same page for so many things, but we weren't communicating that because we didn't know how.
Mm. Yes, and so it sounds like there's a part that in both of you that's grieving that
Yeah.
missed opportunity or missed a miss, I guess.
Well, we are grieving, but we are in communication, and we've now actually formed the foundation for such a beautiful friendship. And, you know, who knows where that will go, but we've had so much repair. And so what's been surprising for me, and what he's expressed the same surprise, is that it actually unburdened the pain.
Wow,
You know,
okay.
it has unburdened not just the pain of that relationship, but all my relationships before that.
Mm,
because I can now see who was involved, and I now have more compassion for my ex-partner's parts, all the exes. And things that I've carried forward in every relationship that would show up in every relationship just aren't there anymore. So I would say our focus is on how amazing the repair has been and what a privilege that has been to get that repair. And that's where we're sort of staying in the moment.
That sounds beautiful. So do you want to talk a little bit about the U-turn in relationships? What is a U-turn, and how are you seeing that change in working with couples and yourself?
Yeah. So the U-turn, I believe, is a concept that Dick Schwartz and Tony Herbine Blank developed together. And it is the differentiator of either IFS couples the way Dick Schwartz does it, or intimacy from the inside out the way Tony Herbine Blank does it. And I just want to compare it to EFT so that you get a real sense of what it is. So in EFT, as I said, there's this sense of, if we can get the partner to soften, then we can develop a relational attachment and healing between the partners. In IFS and IFIO, we say it's not always possible that your partner is going to be available, because they're going to have a parts hijack potentially. And what we don't want is for you to then be lost in a collapse. So the U-turn is, instead of trying to get your partner to change, which is a doomed project, it's, can we get you to unhook and look inside and see what happens for you? So when your partner says or does that thing that activates you, what do you tell yourself about it? And as you tell yourself that, so let's say my partner doesn't respond to a text. So I then get really activated, insta angry, and I tell myself I'm not important. He's got better things to do. I'm clearly not important. And then I feel a lot of fury inside and a lot of pain. And what do I say or do from that place is I send a really mean text back. Like, oh, did I reach my quota for today of texts you're willing to answer? Let me tell you, my sarcastic part has lots of great lines. So, and that then is my protector showing up, right? It shows up sarcastically. That U-turn, so what I would do is I would help my client actually name all of those steps, because they happen inside until the moment of the sarcastic response. And it starts with a false premise, which is that story that I'm not important. That's not true as far as my partner is concerned, because otherwise he wouldn't be here with me. But what probably is true is, somewhere along the line, I had an experience that told me that maybe I'm not important. And that's what's getting activated here. The U-turn is also an unblending tool. So as people start to describe their experience, the act of describing gives them a little observational gap, right? So instead of being
love it.
in it, right?
Yeah.
They're talking about it.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
it forces that little breathing space between being in it and talking about it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's that unhooking you said, right? Like that unhooking, because it's like that could be immediately like, he's a jerk, he doesn't text back, he, and instead of that, like, I'm not important. Like, they might not even get there. They might not even realize that's what's happening.
That's
He's a
right.
jerk. I send the sarcastic text. That happens in like 5 seconds.
That's right.
Not even realizing that exile has been triggered, that I'm not important.
That's right. So the U-turn also forces everyone to slow down. It stops the shame and blame cycle, forces people to go inside. And then there's a second step to that U-turn. Once you sort of have tracked the U-turn for each partner a few times, you'll come back and you'll get to know, well, that part that's sarcastic has a really good reason for doing that. What's it hoping to do for you? So then we start to U-turn into, well, what's the actual intention? And this is very depathologizing, because the intention's always good. Well, if I don't send a sarcastic text, he's not going to know I was hurt. My hope is I've actually communicated that I'm in some pain, and maybe he'll come back and say something nice. The chances of him saying something nice after I send a sarcastic text aren't high, but the intention makes sense.
Yeah.
So then I might say, so what are you afraid would happen if you didn't send a sarcastic text? And they might say, then I won't be seen at all. And then you
Mm,
start really tracking, well, what would happen if you weren't seen? Well, that reminds me of in my childhood when I wasn't seen, or whatever the story is. You just keep following it. Like, what's your concern? What are you afraid? Until you find that exile. And then you put it together for them. You've just done this U-turn and you've done like a vertical exploration into their own system all the way down to the exile. And then you put it together for them. So doesn't that make sense that, when this vulnerability, this I'm not lovable part comes up, your protector shows up and says, I'm going to make sure you don't have to feel that. And I'm going to send a sarcastic message. It might not get you what you need, but it does make sense that that's what's happening, right?
yeah, totally. Yeah. And like, right, what we know about protectors is they often draw what they're afraid of. And so the sarcastic text is going to then draw anger or silence
Right.
and not actually what that part is trying to do, which is be seen and be comforted.
Yeah, exactly. And then we offer another opportunity. Would you be interested if we could help you find another way to respond so that you could actually get your need met or at least increase the likelihood? So there's two things here. One is let's see if we can increase the likelihood. However, if your partner's not available because they might be in a parts hijack they can't unhook from, then that vertical inquiry also at some point I might ask, how do you feel towards that part of you that didn't get your need met? So
Yeah.
that I can get that self to part connection going. So that when their partner's not there, they can hold on
Yeah.
while their
I
partner
love
comes
that.
back.
I love that because that's that attachment healing that happens when self attaches to part, right? Where there's that connection where it's like, okay, my partner might not be able to do it. He's not available, but I can do it for that part of me. What is I can see that part, I can hear that part, I can be with that part that has a need.
That's right. And I just want to say here, this is the brilliance of Toni Herbine Blank. She has put this protocol together using IFS and Imago and neurobiology and family systems and or sorry systems theory, and it is such a beautiful protocol. And coming myself from other protocols, including because I had the neurobiology with sensory motor and then I had the EFT, and I was trained in relational psychotherapy. I'm goosebumping here that she has really developed something that just makes sense, at least to me. I truly believe there's a right modality for every therapist, and my EFT therapist was phenomenal, but it didn't make sense to my system. It made sense to his, and so he can take it because he's good with it, and he was successful with lots of people. I wasn't. But I'm so grateful to Toni for doing this because to me this feels like a gem.
Mm.
And because I get it, I want to spread the word.
Yeah. So tell me about for you. You wrote to me and you said teaching is the best form of learning, and
Yeah.
you love running IFIO informed workshops. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So I started. So in Canada, there were maybe 5 of us who got trained by Toni, and not in Canada. I'm so sorry. In Toronto,
Okay.
I could not locate other people trained in IFIO. And because IFS is exploding now, so it's really hard to get into an IFS level 1, never mind a level 2. So I figured if I could run some introductory workshops, especially for people who had an EFT foundation, because they're so similar, I could maybe at least get people interested enough and have the concepts in their system enough the way I did before I did IFIO, that they could start to work some of those concepts into their practice, and then I would feel comfortable referring people. I want someone who really understands IFS, who really understands parts and really understands their own self system. So that was the impetus. And then, and I checked in with Tony and I said, I really need Canadian colleagues. So this is what I really want to do. And she gave me the go ahead. And then because of the pandemic, it ended up going online. And Derek invited me to do a couples workshop as part of his platform. And that's what launched me. And then it seemed like, oh, it doesn't just have to be Canadians. It can be people who are waiting to get into IFIO, and it could be an intro and a promotion. So that's what I've been doing. And I've now run 3 workshops. I trained a group of therapists in a small town near me that was just for their outfit. But I'm doing an Australian training because I had someone in my last workshop who attended from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. her time in Melbourne.
Oh my goodness.
That's commitment, right?
I
The
know.
Aussies do this.
Aw.
They're amazing. So I just said, no, no, no. I'm going to try to do it in your time zone. So I'm helping them out with
What
the
time
hope.
is it going to be for you?
It'll be I've done it in smaller chunks. It'll be 6:30 till 9:30 p.m. over the course of 4 days instead of
Okay.
the course of 2. And it'll be their morning, and so everyone's happy. Um, yeah.
I love it. So if people want to find out more, or if they want to get on like a waiting list to get to be in attendance and enroll in these workshops, how do they find out about that?
So they can actually there's not a lot on my website at the moment because I haven't published the dates for the 2 fall workshops I plan to run. So they can just contact me. So it's just Liz Phillips Therapy at gmail.com.
Perfect.
They can go to my website, which is lizphillipstherapy.ca. Um, those are the 2 places that they can get a hold of me.
Perfect. And are there spots in your fall workshops?
Yeah, they haven't even been opened yet. So
Perfect.
they're
Okay.
wide open. And there may even be spots in the Australian workshop that's happening in over 4 and then 3 days in July.
People might love that though, right? Like work all day and have a couple hours at night to do a workshop instead of having to take off work. Yeah, that's great. Okay.
So right now it's only open to Australians. Once that's maxed out, if there are any spots left, it will be open to first come, first serve. So I've got a waiting list for that. So people can contact me for that as well.
Perfect. Perfect. Tell me about finding one's soul home. I love that.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about soul in the last year. And I know it's this sort of it's hard to define what that is for people. But for me, it's a sense of rightness and freedom inside myself. And so, when I have worked with individuals and I really like that work, but there's always something I feel like I'm grinding up against. Like I
Mm,
can't put my finger on it. And it's not that I don't, I love all my clients so much, but I feel like I'm not doing the work I was meant to do.
mm,
Whereas when I'm working with a couple, even when it's difficult, even if somehow we end on a note that doesn't feel like complete or good or there's some hurt there, I still feel like I'm in the right place, like it was
mm,
worthwhile.
mm.
This is what I'm meant to do. So IFS landed as a soul home versus EFT and sensory motor, and then IFIO was the completion. It was like this is what I was born to do.
Mm,
And then teaching. There's something about, I could not teach sensory motor. I could probably explain a few concepts here and there, probably the same thing with EFT, but I would always feel like there's something about this I feel like I'm supposed to say, but it doesn't actually resonate for me. Whereas everything about IFIO, I understand in my cells.
mm.
And so it just makes sense. And so I love being able to share that. Maybe teaching isn't even the right word. It's transmitting,
Yeah,
sharing.
yeah.
And
I
it,
love
it
it.
does feel like I'm home now.
Yeah. And I just want to say, Liz just sort of, it's a shame that people can't see you, but so Liz just took her hands and just kind of went from her body and her heart and like transmitted like heart to heart. It felt like that, like transmitting what I know to be true in my heart and my soul to someone else's soul.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
And I feel that at my online trainings, even. I'm so surprised. And I
Yeah.
always go in thinking, I don't know these people.
Yeah.
In minutes, I feel like I'm in love with every person in the shop.
Yeah, I feel so thankful for Zoom, and people will say that, "Well, it's not the same." And I'm like, "Well, you know what? It's fine, and it's great. It's still wonderful. What a wonderful opportunity we all have."
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share before I ask my last question?
I can't think of anything other than, I'm so grateful that you invited me to talk about this. And, it's my dream to get IFIO more and more known. And I'm going to be staffing one of Tony's basic trainings in IFIO in the fall, which I'm really excited about. But it's also, the IFS community and the IFIO community are just, that feels like home.
Mm,
I didn't quite have that sense of community in the other modalities, which is probably no fault of theirs, but there's something about the community here, the support that I get, the
mm.
encouragement, the sharing of information. Everyone's so lovely. It's so exciting to be here. And so, Tammy, you're part of that. And I feel so honored that you invited me to do this podcast. I'm deeply grateful and honored. So thank you so much.
So if you were not doing all the amazing things that you're doing and you had to do something different, what would you do instead?
I've thought about that. I've thought about that. And I can't think of anything else I'd rather do. Every so often I imagine being at a spa for a year. But I know as soon as a couple came into the hot tub, I'd be all over them, like asking them about their relationship. And so I don't think I could do anything else. I think I'm
Yeah.
exactly where I'm supposed to be. I would want to be, I would want to be teaching.
Mm, I
Yeah.
love it.
Maybe I would want to meet Oprah.
Would you want to, does she still do those Soul Sundays? Maybe you could be on her Soul Sunday
Yeah.
and you could talk about IFIO.
I'd like to be on her Soul Sunday with Brene Brown,
Yeah. Hmm.
Liz Gilbert, Glennon Doyle. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Let's make it happen. It
Yeah.
sounds so doable.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm
Just to
dying to
be
meet.
around them and like, let's have tea. Like I'm in, and now I'm coming too.
Yeah,
So I'll be like your assistant. You need me to come and like help you with your wardrobe or something. And that'd
yeah.
be amazing
It'd
just to
be
be in the
so,
energy of these women.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love it. Well,
yeah,
Liz, thank you so much. It was good to talk to you and hear about IFIO and yeah, and the hope, feel the hope of that.
yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me again. This was so much fun and it was so heart-filled. So thanks for all
Oh,
your heart, Tammy.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you like this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.